At just 16, Maya stood on the biggest stage of her life, her voice trembling with every note she sang. The lights of America's Got Talent blazed down on her like stars she'd only dreamed of reaching. Behind those lights sat a man worth billions, tears streaming down his face, a man who'd abandoned her before she was born. If you want to see more incredible stories of redemption and hope, hit that subscribe button right now. We're almost at 10,000 subscribers, and your support means everything. Let's reach this milestone together. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that could change your perspective on life. Maya Rodriguez never knew luxury. The small apartment in South Bronx where she lived with her mother, Carmen, had peeling paint that fell like snow in winter, a ceiling that leaked brown water when it rained, and neighbors who fought through paper-thin walls at all hours. The building superintendent stopped fixing things years ago, and the landlord only appeared when rent was late. But despite everything wrong with apartment 4C, it had something money couldn't buy. Love that filled every corner despite the emptiness in their refrigerator. Carmen worked 3 jobs to keep them afloat. She cleaned offices at dawn when the city was still dark, her hands raw from industrial chemicals that stripped away more than dirt. She waitressed during lunch shifts at a diner in Midtown, smiling through harassment from customers who thought a pretty face entitled them to inappropriate comments. And she stocked shelves at a convenience store until midnight, her back constantly aching from lifting boxes that weighed more than they should. Her body was a map of sacrifice. Calloused hands, swollen ankles, permanent dark circles under her eyes that no amount of sleep could erase. But she never complained, not when Maya apologized for needing new shoes because hers had holes, not when the electricity got shut off and they ate dinner by candlelight, pretending it was romantic instead of desperate. Not even when the medical bills started piling up like an avalanche she couldn't outrun, each envelope another reminder that poverty doesn't just limit dreams, it literally kills. Maya discovered her voice at age 7, singing in the shower to drown out the sounds of her mother crying in the next room. After another bill came, they couldn't pay. The acoustics in their tiny bathroom were surprisingly good, and Maya's voice echoed off the tiles like it belonged somewhere bigger, somewhere better. By 10, she was performing at subway stations with Carmen's old guitar, the one her mother had bought at a pawn shop 15 years ago, with money she'd saved from skipping meals. The subway tunnels became Maya's real education. She learned which stations had the best crowds, which times of day yielded the most generous tips, and how to read an audience within seconds. She developed calluses on her fingertips that matched her mother's, though hers came from guitar strings instead of cleaning supplies. The open case at her feet collected coins and crumpled dollar bills, never enough to change their circumstances, but enough to help. Every cent went toward keeping them afloat, toward the endless fight against eviction notices and shut-off warnings. "Mija, you have a gift," Carmen would say every night, cupping Maya's face with those tired, beautiful hands that smelled like bleach and fryer grease in desperation. "Don't waste it in these tunnels. Promise me you'll dream bigger than this, bigger than me," Maya always promised. But dreams felt like luxuries when reality demanded survival. When choosing between electricity and food was a monthly decision, when making it meant simply making it to next week with a roof overhead. School was Maya's escape. She threw herself into music class, into any activity that let her forget the apartment waiting at home. Her teachers noticed her talent immediately. Mrs. Richardson, her middle school music teacher, stayed late twice a week to give Maya free lessons, teaching her music theory and technique that subway busking couldn't provide. Mr. Chen, her high school counselor, helped her apply for scholarships and programs, building a path toward college that seemed impossible for a girl whose biggest concern was whether they'd have heat in winter. But Maya never told them the full truth. She never mentioned the nights she went to bed hungry so her mother could eat. She never talked about the times she shoplifted medicine when Carmen was sick because they couldn't afford both medication and rent. She never admitted that her perfect attendance record existed because school offered free lunch and a warm building. Pride was one thing poverty couldn't steal, so she guarded it fiercely. Jennifer Martinez became Maya's best friend in freshman year, bonding over being scholarship kids at a school where most students had trust funds. Jennifer's family was working class too, but they had both parents, had steady income, had the kind of stability Maya couldn't imagine. Still, Jennifer understood enough to never judge, never pity, and always show up when it mattered. "You're going to be famous someday," Jennifer would say during lunch, watching Maya hum melodies into her phone's voice recorder. "I'm serious. You're better than half the people on the radio." "Famous doesn't pay rent," Maya would reply, practical in the way poverty teaches you to be. "I just need to help Mom. That's enough." But secretly, in the dark hours between midnight and dawn, when she couldn't sleep because her mother was coughing in the next room, Maya did dream bigger. She dreamed of recording studios and sold-out concerts. She dreamed of buying her mother a house with a yard, a car that didn't break down, clothes without patches. She dreamed of a life where medical bills didn't mean choosing which vital service to lose. She just never imagined those dreams would collide with reality in the way they eventually did. Everything changed 6 months before the AGT auditions. Carmen collapsed at the diner, falling unconscious between the breakfast rush and lunch prep. The ambulance ride alone cost $800 they didn't have. The hospital visit cost thousands more. And the diagnosis came swift and merciless. Stage 3 pancreatic cancer, already spreading, already deadly. The oncologist was kind but honest. With treatment, Carmen might have 2 years. Without it, maybe 6 months. The treatment would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. Insurance, the bare minimum plan Carmen's employer provided, covered a fraction. The rest was impossible. Maya watched her mother process the death sentence with devastating calm. Carmen didn't cry in the hospital. She didn't scream or rage against the unfairness. She just nodded, asked practical questions about pain management, and squeezed Maya's hand like she was the one who needed comforting. They cried together that night in their apartment, holding each other in the dark while cockroaches skittered across the kitchen floor. Maya felt rage consume her, rage at a healthcare system that valued profit over lives, at a world where her mother's survival depended on money they'd never have, at the cosmic cruelty of watching the best person she knew die slowly because they were poor. "I'm going to fix this," Maya whispered into her mother's hair. "I'm going to save you." "Oh, mija." Carmen's voice was broken, defeated in a way Maya had never heard before. "Some things can't be fixed. Some things we just have to accept." "No." Maya pulled back, her face fierce with determination that bordered on delusion. "I refuse to accept this. There has to be a way." She started working. In addition to school and subway performances, Maya took a job at a fast food restaurant, lying about her age to get hired. She worked 30 hours a week, sleeping 4 hours a night, her grades dropping as exhaustion consumed her. She set up GoFundMe pages that raised a few $1,000s, generous by normal standards, meaningless against cancer's price tag. She sold everything she owned worth selling, applied for every grant and charity program that existed. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. Maya watched her mother wither over those 6 months like a flower denied sunlight. Carmen tried to hide the pain, but Maya heard her gasping at night, saw the way she clutched her side when she thought no one was looking, noticed how clothes hung on her shrinking frame. The woman who'd sacrificed everything was dying, and Maya felt powerless in a way that made her want to scream until her voice gave out. The cancer was winning. Time was running out. And then Jennifer showed her the flyer. "Look." Jennifer thrust her phone in Maya's face during lunch, her eyes bright with desperate hope. "America's Got Talent. They're holding auditions in Manhattan next month. First prize is $1 million. Maya stared at the screen. $1 million. The number seemed fictional, impossible, cruel in its enormity. That was more money than she'd earned in a lifetime of subway performances and minimum wage jobs. That was enough to save her mother. That was everything. "Thousands of people audition," Maya said, her voice flat. "Hundreds are talented. What makes me special enough to win?" "Are you serious right now?" Jennifer grabbed her shoulders. "You're the most talented person I know. Your subway videos have hundreds of thousands of views online. People literally cry listening to you sing. This is your chance." "It's impossible. So is everything else you're trying. At least this impossible thing has $1 million prize." Maya went home that evening to find her mother passed out on the couch, too weak to make it to bed, still wearing her diner uniform because she didn't have energy to change. A new medical bill sat on the counter. $12,000 for a single emergency room visit. They'd never pay it. It would join the mountain of debt that followed them everywhere. Maya picked up her phone and registered for the AGT auditions before she could talk herself out of it. The audition line stretched around the block in Manhattan, thousands of hopefuls clutching dreams as tightly as Maya clutched her guitar. She stood there for 7 hours under the August sun, watching people come and go, some crying, some jubilant, most disappointed. The odds were astronomical. The competition was fierce. But Maya had something most didn't. Nothing left to lose. Carmen insisted on coming despite her weakness, despite the doctor's orders to rest. She sat in a folding chair Maya borrowed from a sympathetic security guard, wrapped in a blanket even though it was 90 degrees, her skin gray and eyes sunken. But she smiled at her daughter with fierce pride that transcended the physical deterioration. "You're going to be amazing, Mija. I know it. I've always known it. What if I'm not good enough? Then we'll find another way. But Maya, you are good enough. You've always been enough." When Maya's number was finally called, you're 327 out of 6,000 auditioners, her hands shook so badly she nearly dropped her guitar walking through the door. The room was smaller than she expected, almost intimate. 3 judges sat behind a long table, faces she'd seen on TV, people who'd discovered superstars and destroyed dreams with equal efficiency. They looked bored, exhausted from hearing mediocre talent all day, their expressions blank with professional detachment. "Name and age?" one asked without looking up from their notes. "Maya Rodriguez, 16. "Where are you from?" "South Bronx." That got a glance. The Bronx meant grit, meant struggle, meant authentic story that played well on television. Maya hated that her poverty was marketable, but she'd use every advantage available. "What are you singing today?" "An original song. It's called When Stars Fall Down." Now all 3 judges looked up. Original songs were risky. They succeeded spectacularly or failed miserably, with no middle ground. Most contestants played it safe with covers, but Maya didn't have the luxury of safety. "Tell us about the song," another judge prompted, genuine curiosity replacing boredom. Maya took a breath. "It's about my mother. She has stage 3 pancreatic cancer. We can't afford treatment. I'm here because this prize money is the only way to save her life. The song is about watching someone you love disappear and being powerless to stop it." The room's energy shifted. The judges exchanged looks. This wasn't just another sob story. The desperation in Maya's voice was too raw, too real to be performance. "Whenever you're ready." Maya closed her eyes and thought of her mother. She thought of every sacrifice. Every night Carmen went to bed hungry so Maya could eat. Every moment of love that poverty couldn't steal. Every time her mother smiled through agony. When she opened her mouth, the song poured out. Raw, honest, devastating. The lyrics told their story without embellishment. A daughter watching her hero slowly disappear, powerless against an enemy she couldn't fight. The melody was haunting, built from Maya's years singing in subway tunnels where sound echoed off concrete walls like ghosts. She sang about guilt, the guilt of not being able to save someone who'd saved you countless times. She sang about fear, the fear of being left alone in a world that was already cruel with her mother beside her. She sang about desperate hope, the kind that feels foolish, but survives anyway because the alternative is surrender. Her voice cracked on the bridge, emotion overwhelming technique. But instead of ruining the performance, it made it transcendent. This wasn't polished pop perfection. This was a girl ripping her heart open on stage because she had no other choice. When the last note faded, silence filled the room. Maya opened her eyes to find all 3 judges staring at her, and one was openly crying. "That was..." The crying judge paused, wiping tears. "That was extraordinary. Where did you learn to sing like that?" "In the subway, to make money for my mom. She's sick, and I need to help her." "How long have you been performing?" "Since I was 10. 6 years." The judges conferred quietly while Maya stood there, her heart hammering. This was it. The moment that would determine if her mother lived or died. The weight of it pressed down until she could barely breathe. Finally, the head judge spoke. Maya, what you just did was remarkable. The technical skill is there, but more importantly, the emotional truth is undeniable. We see thousands of people and most are performing. You were just being, and that's incredibly rare. Maya's throat tightened. Does that mean it's a yes from me? Yes from me too. And yes from me. Maya, you're going to Hollywood. Maya's legs nearly gave out. She gripped her guitar for support, tears streaming down her face. Thank you. Thank you so much. You don't know what this means. We do, the judge said gently. Now go tell your mother. And Maya, keep that authenticity. Don't let anyone polish it away. That raw truth is your power. Maya stumbled out of the audition room into Carmen's arms. They cried together in the hallway while other contestants stared, both understanding that this was more than success. It was a lifeline thrown to drowning people. What Maya didn't know, couldn't have known, was that her audition had been watched by someone else. James Thornton sat in a private viewing room reserved for show sponsors and network executives, a space where wealthy investors could monitor their entertainment investments. At 53, he was worth $12 billion, built from a tech empire he'd started in a garage at 22. Forbes called him a genius. Wall Street called him ruthless. His ex-wife called him a coward who ran from responsibility. She wasn't wrong. 30 years ago, James was a broke college student at NYU, dating Carmen Reyes, a beautiful girl from the Bronx, with dreams of becoming a teacher. Carmen was everything James's wealthy family wasn't. Warm, genuine, unimpressed by pedigree or connections. They met at a campus protest, bonded over shared idealism, and fell into the kind of love that feels inevitable until reality intrudes. They were together for 8 months. 8 perfect months where James pretended class didn't matter, where he introduced Carmen to his roommates but never his family, where he talked about the future without meaning it. When Carmen got pregnant at 19, James's carefully constructed fantasy collapsed. He had ambitions, plans, a future that didn't include a baby with a girl from the wrong side of the tracks. His parents were grooming him to take over the family business. He had venture capitalists interested in his tech startup idea. He had a life trajectory that required focus, sacrifice, ruthlessness. A child would derail everything. So he did what cowards do. He disappeared, changed his phone number, dropped out of NYU and transferred to Stanford. Left Carmen alone with a pregnancy she hadn't planned and a broken heart she'd never quite heal. He told himself she was better off without him, that he'd only drag her down, that she'd find someone better. All lies he needed to believe to live with what he'd done. Carmen never told him she named their daughter Maya, Spanish for illusion, because that's what their love had been. Beautiful but unreal, doomed from the start. She never told him about the abortion clinic she walked into 3 times before walking out, unable to go through with it. She never told him about the years she raised Maya alone while he built his empire, or how she'd see his face on magazine covers and feel nothing but tired regret for the boy he'd been and disappointment for the man he'd become. She kept the secret, protecting a man who didn't deserve it, hoping Maya would never know her father chose money over her. James had spent 3 decades bearing the guilt. He married someone from his social class, a banker's daughter with the right connections and zero warmth. They had 2 children, Ethan and Claire, legitimate heirs raised with every advantage. He pretended his past didn't exist, that he'd never abandoned a pregnant girlfriend, that the decision didn't haunt him in the space between sleep and waking. But guilt has a way of resurfacing. It showed up in sleepless nights when he'd wonder if Carmen had kept the baby, if he had a child somewhere he'd never know. It appeared in the way he couldn't look at teenage girls without calculating ages, wondering if that could be his daughter. It manifested in the charity donations he made to organizations helping single mothers, donations that felt like blood money, like trying to buy absolution for a sin that couldn't be forgiven. When he saw Maya's audition footage, time stopped. The production assistant had mentioned a compelling story, sick mother, poor kid, authentic struggle, and James had half listened while reviewing quarterly reports. But then the video played, and he looked up, and his entire world shattered. She looked exactly like Carmen had at 19. The same dark eyes that seemed to hold oceans, the same defiant chin that jutted forward when she was afraid but refused to show it, the same fire that poverty couldn't extinguish and hardship couldn't dull. But it was more than resemblance. It was her age that made James's blood run cold. 16. 16 years old. The math was impossible to deny, unavoidable in its certainty. Carmen had been pregnant when he'd left. She'd gone through with it. She'd raised their child alone while he'd pretended she didn't exist. And now that child was standing on national television, competing to save the woman he'd abandoned, singing about powerlessness while he sat in a room that cost more than most people earned in a year. James sat frozen as Maya sang about her dying mother. His hands gripped the armrest so tight his knuckles turned white, and his hands went numb. Carmen. His Carmen was dying, and he hadn't known, couldn't have known, wouldn't have cared before this moment. This girl, his daughter, his flesh and blood, was competing on national television to save the woman he'd destroyed. The universe had a cruel sense of irony, a cosmic justice that felt designed specifically to torment him. He made a decision in that moment, watching Maya's raw performance. He would watch her journey on the show. He would observe from the shadows like he'd observed from the shadows for 30 years. And if she won, he would finally do what he should have done 3 decades ago. Help Carmen, but anonymously, because revealing himself now would only cause pain. What right did he have to insert himself into their lives after all these years? What claim could he make to fatherhood when he'd actively chosen to be absent? James Thornton was still a coward, but at least now he was a coward trying to make amends. He called his assistant immediately. Find out everything about Maya Rodriguez, quietly. I want to know where she lives, her mother's condition, their financial situation. Everything. Sir, is this related to business? It's personal, and it stays completely confidential. No one knows about this. No one. The report came back within hours. James read it in his Manhattan penthouse, alone with a glass of scotch that tasted like regret. Carmen worked 3 jobs. They lived in Section 8 housing. Medical debt exceeded $300,000. GoFundMe campaigns had raised $8,000. Maya performed in subway stations to help pay bills. They were drowning in a way James couldn't remember ever understanding because he'd always had lifeboats. He'd done this. His absence had created this struggle. If he'd stayed, if he'd been a man instead of a coward, Carmen wouldn't be dying of treatable cancer because she couldn't afford treatment. Maya wouldn't be 16 years old with the weight of her mother's life on her shoulders. They'd have had options, security, a future that didn't depend on winning a television competition. James sat in his penthouse worth $30 million and cried for the first time in 20 years. He cried for Carmen, for Maya, for the man he could have been but chose not to be. He cried for the loss of people he'd never really known, but had destroyed nonetheless. And he made a promise to himself. He would fix this. Somehow, without revealing who he was, he would make sure Carmen got treatment. He would give Maya a chance at her competition without the burden of her mother's death hanging over her. It wouldn't make up for 30 years of absence. It wouldn't earn forgiveness or redemption. But it was something. Finally, after 3 decades of running, it was something. Maya's journey through Hollywood was a whirlwind of stress and improbable success. She advanced through the Judge Cuts round with a heart-wrenching performance of another original song, this one about survival against impossible odds. The producers loved her story. It was gold for television, the kind of narrative that made people tune in week after week. They gave her extra interview time, extra camera focus, built her into one of the season's front runners. But behind the scenes, Maya was unraveling. Carmen's condition worsened despite starting treatment. The chemo made her violently ill. She lost her hair, then her appetite, then her ability to work even one shift. They fell behind on rent. Maya juggled rehearsals with caring for her mother, sleeping 3 hours a night, surviving on vending machine food and adrenaline. The medical bills kept coming. Each hospital visit added thousands more to debt they'd never pay. Collection agencies called constantly. The stress of it all was killing Carmen as surely as the cancer. The doctors said stress weakened the immune system, made treatment less effective. Maya felt trapped in a nightmare where every day brought new catastrophes she couldn't prevent. Jennifer moved in to help, sleeping on their couch. helping Maya with everything from meals to medication schedules. Mrs. Richardson organized a fundraiser at school that raised $3,000. Mr. Chen negotiated with the hospital for payment plans. Their community rallied in small ways that meant everything but changed nothing about the fundamental problem. They needed hundreds of thousands of dollars they didn't have. During the live shows, Maya performed 6 times over 3 months. Each song was more emotionally devastating than the last, pulling from a well of pain that seemed bottomless. She sang about grief before it happened, about watching someone you love disappear slowly, about the rage of being young and powerless against systems that don't care if you live or die. Her performances were uncomfortable to watch. Too raw, too honest, lacking the polished performance quality most contestants brought. But America responded. They voted in record numbers. Maya's performances went viral, shared millions of times across social media, with captions like, "This girl will break your heart," and "Most painful AGT performance ever." She gained a following of people who saw their own struggles reflected in her story. The medical bankruptcies, the impossible choices, the way poverty slowly kills in a country that pretends it cares. The judges praised her consistently but worried about her mental state. After her 4th performance, when she barely made it off stage before collapsing in tears, the head judge pulled her aside. "Maya, you need to take care of yourself. This competition isn't worth destroying your health." "My mother is dying," Maya said flatly. "I don't have the luxury of self-care." "I understand, but..." "No, you don't understand. You've never had to choose between rent and medicine. You've never watched someone die because they're poor. This competition is the only chance my mother has, so I'll break myself into pieces if that's what it takes to save her." The judge had no response to that. What could you say to someone for whom failure meant death? James watched every episode from his Manhattan penthouse, obsessively tracking Maya's progress like his life depended on it. He attended the live tapings, sitting in VIP boxes where contestants couldn't see him, close enough to see Maya's exhaustion, the way her hands shook between performances, the hollow look in her eyes that mirrored Carmen's in those final months before he'd left. He wanted to help openly, to walk down and introduce himself, to write a check that would solve everything. But he didn't. He couldn't. What right did he have? How could he explain 30 years of absence? The truth would destroy them worse than the struggle, or at least that's what he told himself to justify continued cowardice. Instead, he helped secretly. He bought votes, not directly, because the show didn't work that way, but through influence. His company's own shares in social media platforms. He ensured Maya's performances got algorithmic boosts, maximum promotion, trending topic placement. He used his power to give his daughter an advantage while maintaining his disguise as a stranger. His legitimate children noticed his obsession. Ethan, 19 and studying at Yale, came home for a weekend and found his father watching AGT rehearsal footage at 2 a.m. "Dad, what's going on?" "You never watch reality TV." "Just interested in this season," James said, pausing the video of Maya mid-performance. "In that girl specifically? You've watched her audition like 20 times." James considered lying, then decided his son deserved partial truth. "She reminds me of someone I knew a long time ago. Someone I hurt. I'm rooting for her, I guess." Ethan studied his father's face, seeing something he'd never seen before. Vulnerability, genuine emotion beyond the calculating businessman persona. "There's more to this story, isn't there?" "Yes, but it's not mine to tell yet." His wife Sarah noticed too. She'd been married to James for 20 years, a union based on convenience more than passion, the kind of partnership wealthy people entered for dynasty building rather than love. She confronted him after finding him crying while watching Maya's 5th performance. "Who is she, James?" "What?" "That girl on the show. Who is she to you?" James considered continuing the lie, but he was so tired of lies. 30 years of them had poisoned everything good in his life. "A mistake I made a long time ago, one I'm trying to fix without causing more damage." "You're being intentionally vague." "I'm being as honest as I can be right now." Sarah studied him, then sighed. "We've never been in love, James. We both know that. Our marriage is a business arrangement that works because we don't pretend otherwise. But I've never seen you care about anything the way you care about that girl's success. So I hope whatever your mistake was, that you find a way to actually fix it instead of just observing from a distance like you do with everything else in life. It was the most honest conversation they'd had in years. It was also the beginning of the end of their marriage, though neither acknowledged it yet. 2 weeks before the AGT finals, Maya's world collapsed completely. Carmen was rushed to the hospital in an ambulance, her body shutting down faster than anyone expected. The cancer had spread to her liver, her lungs, her brain. She was dying actively now, not slowly. A matter of weeks, maybe days, not the months they'd been counting on. Maya sat in the hospital room holding her mother's hand, watching monitors beep and machines breathe for someone too weak to do it themselves. The competition seemed meaningless now. What did $1 million matter if her mother died before she could win it? "You need to keep going," Carmen whispered through the oxygen mask. Her voice was so weak Maya had to lean in close to hear. "The finals are next week. You've come this far." "I can't perform while you're dying, Mom. I can't." "You can and you will. Maya, listen to me." Carmen squeezed her daughter's hand with whatever strength remained. "If I die before you win, I need you to promise me something. Promise me you'll use that prize money, if you win it, to build a life. Not just to pay my debts, but to actually live. Go to college. Make music. Be happy. Don't let my death define your entire existence. Stop talking like you're going to die. I am going to die, mija. We both know it. But you're going to live. And I need to know you'll actually let yourself live, not just survive." Maya couldn't respond through her tears. The unfairness of it all was suffocating. Her mother was the best person she'd ever known. Kind, selfless, endlessly loving. And she was dying at 48 because they were poor. Because cancer treatment cost money. Because American healthcare valued profit over human life. Because the world was fundamentally, irredeemably unjust. She wanted to scream. She wanted to burn everything down. Instead, she made a promise she wasn't sure she could keep. "I'll live, Mom. I promise. I'll live enough for both of us." The next morning, a miracle arrived. The hospital administrator called Carmen's room with news that seemed impossible. An anonymous donor had paid off her entire medical bill, over $340,000, and set up a fund for experimental treatment at a cutting-edge facility in Boston. The treatment wasn't guaranteed to work, but it offered real hope. Actual medical hope, not the false kind doctors give to dying patients to ease their exit. "Who would do this?" Carmen asked through tears, the first she'd cried since her diagnosis. "Who even knows about us?" The hospital administrator consulted her notes. "The donation came through a shell corporation called Thornton Charitable Trust. We legally can't reveal more than that. But whoever it was has also arranged private medical transport to Boston and covered all housing costs for you and your daughter during treatment." Thornton. Maya filed the name away, something about it nagging at her consciousness. "Can we find out who it is? I want to thank them." "I'm sorry, but anonymous means anonymous. They specifically requested no contact, no publicity, no acknowledgement. They just want to help." Maya should have felt relief. Pure, uncomplicated relief that her mother might live. Instead, she felt suspicious. Something about the timing felt too perfect, too orchestrated, too convenient. Rich people didn't just randomly pay off hospital bills for strangers. There was always an angle, always a reason. The fundraising campaigns had made their story public, but they'd only raised a few $1,000s. This was different. This was someone with extraordinary wealth deciding to play God in their lives. But she didn't have time to investigate. Her mother was being transferred to Boston for treatment that afternoon. Maya had to pack, arrange temporary leave from school, figure out how to manage both her mother's care and AGT rehearsals. The finals were in 9 days. She had to be perfect. She had to win. Because even with this mysterious donation, they still needed that $1 million for long-term security, for the life after, if there was a life after. What Maya didn't know, couldn't have guessed, was that James Thornton had made the donation after watching news coverage of Carmen's hospitalization. Entertainment reporters had staked out the hospital, getting footage of Maya entering with mascara running down her face, looking devastated. The headline, "AGT finalist mother hospitalized," competition future uncertain. James had watched that footage in his office, surrounded by quarterly reports he couldn't focus on, and made the decision he'd been avoiding for weeks. He called his lawyers immediately, demanding total anonymity, and transferred $500,000 from his personal account before he could talk himself out of it. The money meant nothing to him. He'd lost more than that on bad investments he barely noticed. But to Carmen, to Maya, it meant everything. It meant life instead of death. It meant a future instead of funeral planning. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough to make up for 30 years of absence. But it was something. Finally, after decades of running, he'd helped the people he'd destroyed, even if they never knew it was him, even if he never got credit or forgiveness or acknowledgement. He'd done it because it was right, because he couldn't live with himself otherwise, because being a coward for 30 years was exhausting and he needed to be better, even if that better came 3 decades too late. He stood at his office window looking out at Manhattan, a city where he'd made his fortune, a city where somewhere his daughter was preparing to compete for money she shouldn't need, and made a decision. He would attend the finals in person. He would sit in the audience this time, not hidden in VIP boxes. He would watch his daughter perform, and maybe that would be enough closure for him to finally move forward. James had no idea that decision would change everything. The AGT finals arrived with the weight of the entire world pressing down on Maya's shoulders. 10 finalists remained, each with compelling stories and exceptional talent. There was a magician who'd escaped war-torn Syria, a dancer who'd overcome paralysis, a comedian with cystic fibrosis, an opera singer with autism. Everyone had struggled. Everyone had overcome impossible odds. But Maya was the favorite, the poor girl singing to save her dying mother. The narrative too perfect for reality television, too heartbreaking for audiences to resist. The pressure was crushing. Maya had to win. Second place got $25,000, nice but meaningless against the life she needed to build. Only first place offered real security. Only first place meant everything. Carmen watched from Boston via live stream, too weak to travel but strong enough to witness her daughter's biggest moment. The experimental treatment was working, slowly, painfully, with side effects that made chemo look gentle. But she was stable. Her scans showed the tumor shrinking. She might live to see Christmas. She might live to see Maya graduate. She might actually survive. Maya stood backstage at the Microsoft Theater in Los Angeles, surrounded by other finalists, all of them nervous and excited and terrified. But Maya's terror was different. For the others, losing meant disappointment. For Maya, losing felt like failing her mother again, like all the struggle and sacrifice would amount to nothing. Jennifer flew out to support her, sitting in the audience with Mrs. Richardson and Mr. Chen and dozens of Maya's classmates who'd pooled money for the trip. They held signs with her name, wore matching t-shirts, created a cheering section that made Maya feel less alone. But she was alone ultimately. On stage, it would be just her and her guitar and the hope of 20 million viewers watching from home. She chose her final song carefully, another original called "Thank You for the Pain." It was about finding strength in suffering, about how the hardest moments shape us into who we're meant to become, about transforming tragedy into meaning. She wrote it in her dressing room an hour before going on stage, the words pouring out like a confession, like blood from a wound she'd been pressing closed for 16 years. When her name was called, Maya walked onto that stage carrying everything. Her mother's love, their shared struggle, the weight of every person who'd ever felt powerless against systems designed to crush them. The audience erupted in cheers. 20 million people watched from home. Maya stood in her simple dress, bought at a thrift store because even with newfound support she couldn't afford designer clothes, holding her battered guitar, and waited for silence. "This song is for my mom," she said into the microphone, her voice steady despite the tears waiting just behind her eyes. "And for everyone who's ever felt powerless. We're stronger than we know. We survive things that should break us. And sometimes, against all odds, we actually win." She sang. God, how she sang. The performance was transcendent, otherworldly, the kind that makes people remember where they were when they heard it. Maya poured 16 years of struggle into 4 minutes of music. Every lonely night, every empty stomach, every moment watching her mother suffer, every time she'd wanted to give up but couldn't because giving up meant death. She sang about poverty with the authority of someone who'd lived it. She sang about love with the depth of someone who'd been loved by the right person. She sang about hope with the desperation of someone for whom hope was the only weapon against despair. But she also sang about transformation, about how suffering doesn't have to destroy you. It can forge you into something harder, sharper, more beautiful than you were before. She sang about finding meaning in meaninglessness, about making art from agony, about refusing to let circumstances define destiny. When the last note faded into perfect silence, the audience exploded. Standing ovation for 3 solid minutes. The judges were crying, the host was crying, millions of viewers at home were crying. It was the performance of the season, possibly the decade, the kind that would be replayed and analyzed and remembered. Maya stood there absorbing the applause, feeling simultaneously everything and nothing. She'd done what she came to do. Now all that remained was waiting for votes, for America to decide if her struggle was compelling enough to win. But before the voting began, before the night could proceed as planned, something unprecedented happened. A man walked onto the stage from the wings. Security tried to stop him, but he brushed past them with the authority of someone used to getting his way, someone for whom rules were suggestions. The cameras caught him in profile first, a distinguished man in an expensive suit, his face familiar to anyone who followed business news, his presence utterly wrong for this moment. James Thornton, billionaire tech mogul, one of the richest men in America. Walking onto the AGT stage during the live finals for no reason anyone could understand. "What are you doing?" the host demanded, professional composure cracking. "Sir, you can't be up here during... I need to say something." James's voice carried across the now silent auditorium, amplified by microphones he shouldn't have access to. His eyes were locked on Maya, who stared at him in complete confusion. 20 million people watched, as confused as she was. To Maya, "I need to tell her the truth." The producers were screaming into their headsets. This was live television. This was unprecedented. But no one could stop what happened next because power, real power, the kind bought with billions of dollars, didn't follow rules designed for ordinary people. James walked to the center of the stage, stopping 5 feet from Maya. His face was wet with tears, his carefully constructed composure cracking after decades of careful control. This was the moment. After 30 years of cowardice, he was finally being honest. In front of the entire world, he was finally telling the truth. "My name is James Thornton, and 16 years ago I made the worst decision of my life." His voice broke but continued. "I abandoned the woman I loved because I was a coward who chose ambition over responsibility. That woman was Carmen Rodriguez." He paused, letting the revelation land. "Your mother, Maya. I'm your father." The revelation hit like an explosion. Maya's guitar slipped from her hands, clattering against the stage floor. The audience gasped collectively. The judges sat frozen in shock. This wasn't scripted drama. This was a man destroying his carefully constructed life on national television because he couldn't carry the lie anymore. "I've watched you from the shadows this entire competition," James continued, the words tumbling out now like he couldn't stop them. Like 30 years of pressure finally breaking a dam. "I paid your mother's medical bills anonymously. I set up her treatment fund. Not because I'm generous, but because I'm trying to fix what I broke 30 years ago. I'm trying to be the father I should have been from the beginning." Maya stood completely still, her face cycling through emotions too fast to process. Shock, confusion, rage, hurt, betrayal. Then she spoke, her voice cold and hard in a way it had never been during any performance. "You think money fixes abandonment? You think showing up now, after my mother and I struggled alone for 16 years, makes you my father?" She laughed bitterly, the sound sharp enough to cut. "My father was the neighbor who taught me to play guitar because you weren't there. My father was the teacher who stayed late to help me with homework because you weren't there. My father was every person who showed up when you didn't. You're just a rich man trying to buy redemption on live television. The words cut James deeper than any business rival ever had, deeper than any divorce proceeding or hostile takeover or corporate battle. He stood there exposed and devastated as Maya continued. But thank you for the money. Thank you for saving my mother. That's more than you've ever done for us in 16 years. It doesn't make you my father, but at least you finally did something useful. She picked up her guitar, her hands steady now with rage. Now get off my stage. I have a competition to win. Security finally intervened, escorting James away as the audience sat in stunned silence. The host tried to regain control, stammering through apologies and explanations for something that had no explanation. They cut to commercial early, giving everyone time to process what had just happened, giving producers time to figure out how to salvage a finale that had just exploded into the most dramatic television moment of the year. Social media detonated. Within minutes, James Thornton's name trended worldwide. The video clip went viral faster than anything in internet history. Debate raged. Was this manipulative, a billionaire hijacking his daughter's moment? Or courageous, a man finally taking responsibility for his past? Maya trended alongside him, but now for reasons beyond her talent. The narrative had shifted from poor girl saves mother to billionaire reveals secret daughter on live TV. It was exactly what James had wanted to avoid. He tried to help from the shadows to give Maya her moment without inserting himself. But in the end, his cowardice won again. He couldn't resist the dramatic gesture, the public confession, the need to make his redemption visible. He destroyed Maya's finals performance with his own guilt. Even trying to do better, he'd managed to make it about himself. The voting happened in chaos. Producers debated canceling, postponing, doing anything to regain control. But they were live. 20 million people were watching. The show had to continue, so they did, pretending the last 15 minutes hadn't just fundamentally changed everything. Maya won. She won by the largest voting margin in AGT history, not just for her talent, though that was undeniable, but for the way she'd handled James's ambush with dignity and strength. She'd won despite the drama, or maybe because of it. Either way, she'd secured the $1 million that would complete her mother's treatment and give them the future they'd always been denied. Maya stood on stage accepting her trophy, confetti falling around her like snow, and felt absolutely nothing. Victory tasted hollow when it came with the knowledge that her entire life had been built on a lie. That somewhere out there was a father who'd let her suffer because he valued success more than family. That even now, even trying to make amends, he'd managed to make her biggest moment about himself. Backstage was chaos, reporters screaming questions, agents trying to sign her. Everyone wanting a piece of the story. Maya escaped to her dressing room and locked the door, finally allowing herself to break down. Jennifer found her there an hour later, crying so hard she couldn't breathe. "I won," Maya gasped between sobs. "I should be happy. Why am I not happy?" "Because your win got hijacked by a man who abandoned you. Because you just found out your entire life story was incomplete. Because you're 16 and dealing with things adults couldn't handle." Jennifer held her while she cried. "It's okay to not be okay right now." Maya's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Calls from Carmen, from reporters, from James's lawyers. She ignored them all except her mother's. Carmen was crying when Maya finally answered. But they were complicated tears. Joy at Maya's win, mixed with pain at James's revelation, mixed with fear of what came next. "I'm so sorry, mija. I should have told you about him years ago." "Why didn't you?" Maya's voice was small, young in a way it hadn't been for years. "Why did you let me think I just didn't have a father?" "Because I didn't want you to know your father chose his dreams over you. I wanted to protect you from that pain. I wanted you to feel wanted, even if it meant lying about why he wasn't there." Carmen's voice broke. "He's not a bad man, Maya. He was just a scared boy who made a terrible choice. People deserve second chances. He didn't just abandon you, Mom. He abandoned us. And now he thinks money and a public confession makes it okay. The money saved my life. Doesn't that count for something?" Maya didn't answer. She couldn't. Her emotions were too tangled. Rage and hurt and grief and something she refused to name that felt dangerously close to longing for the father she'd never known. Because despite everything, despite the abandonment and the lies and the theatrical revelation, part of her had always wondered about him. Part of her had always wanted a father. And now she had one, sort of, and she hated that she cared. 3 months passed. Carmen entered remission, the experimental treatment working beyond anyone's expectations. She would need monitoring for years, possibly forever, but she would live. She would see Maya graduate, see her daughter build the career she deserved, maybe even meet grandchildren someday. It was the miracle they'd prayed for, bought with money from a father who'd been absent for 16 years. Maya used her AGT winnings carefully. She bought them a house, nothing extravagant, just a small place in Queens with a backyard and neighbors who didn't fight through walls. She set up a college fund and retirement account for Carmen. She bought her mother a car so she wouldn't have to take 3 buses to work. Simple things that felt like luxuries after a lifetime of poverty. She also got offered multiple record deals. 3 major labels competed for her, but Maya chose the smallest one, an independent label that promised creative control over the corporate machine that promised fame. She'd learned from her father's example what happened when you chose success over authenticity. James Thornton tried to reach out multiple times during those months. Letters arrived at their new house, long, rambling apologies written by a man clearly unaccustomed to vulnerability. He sent gifts, a vintage Martin guitar worth $50,000, Carmen's favorite orchids delivered weekly, college brochures for Juilliard and Berkeley with notes saying he'd cover full tuition. Maya returned everything unopened except the letters, which she read late at night when she couldn't sleep. "He's trying me, huh?" Carmen said gently one evening as another package arrived. "Maybe you should give him a chance." "Why should I? He had 16 years to try. He only showed up when it was convenient for him, when I was already successful enough to find without him." "Is that really fair? He didn't know where we were." "I never told him about you." "He never asked. He could have looked for you, Mom. He chose not to." Carmen sighed, looking older than her 48 years despite the remission. "You're right. But Maya, holding on to anger doesn't hurt him. It hurts you. I'm not saying forgive him. I'm saying maybe meet him. Hear what he has to say. Not for his sake, but for yours." The letters kept coming. Maya read about James's regret, his years of guilt, the way he'd followed her subway performances through YouTube videos recorded by strangers. She read about his other children, her half-siblings Ethan and Claire, and how he'd told them the truth, destroying his marriage and family peace to finally be honest about his past. She read about his divorce, finalized 2 months after the AGT finale, Sarah citing irreconcilable differences and fundamental dishonesty in the filing. She read about the James Thornton Foundation for single mothers he'd started, funded entirely by his personal wealth, $100 million dedicated to helping women in Carmen's situation, as if charity could absolve personal sin. The letters were pathetic and honest and desperately sad. Maya hated that they made her feel something other than anger. She hated that she understood on some level that people were complicated and capable of both terrible choices and genuine remorse. She hated that part of her, the part that was still just a girl who'd never had a father, wanted to believe he'd changed. 6 months after winning AGT, Maya released her first album, From the Tunnels. It went platinum in 3 weeks. She performed on national tours, on late-night talk shows, at the Grammy Awards where she was nominated for Best New Artist. She became the success story everyone predicted, the poor girl who made it big through talent and determination and refusing to let poverty define her limits. But fame didn't change her core. She still remembered what hunger felt like, what it meant to choose between electricity and food, what it felt like to watch your mother die slowly because you were poor. Those memories shaped everything: her music, her choices, her refusal to play the celebrity game. She gave interview where she talked about healthcare reform and wealth inequality. She used her platform to advocate for people still trapped in the poverty she'd escaped. She also started the Carmen Rodriguez Foundation, helping families dealing with medical bankruptcy. The irony wasn't lost on her, using her platform to help people the way James's anonymous donation had helped them. Maybe she was more like her father than she wanted to admit. Maybe the capacity for redemption, however late, ran in their blood. On Maya's 18th birthday, Carmen made a request that felt like a betrayal. Meet him. Just once. Not for him, for you. So you don't spend your life wondering what if. So you don't carry this anger into every relationship you ever have. Meet him and decide for yourself who he is now, not who he was 30 years ago. Maya agreed reluctantly, motivated more by her mother's peace of mind than her own curiosity. They met at a small coffee shop in Queens, neutral territory where neither had advantage. Maya arrived with Jennifer for support, determined to keep the meeting short and emotionally distant. James arrived early, looking older than he had on that stage 10 months ago. The public revelation had cost him everything: his marriage, his relationship with his legitimate children who felt betrayed by the secret, his carefully constructed reputation. His company stock had dropped 20% when the scandal broke. He'd stepped down as CEO, passing control to his COO while he dealt with personal matters. Starting over, being honest, had destroyed the empire he'd built on lies. Somehow that made him more real than when he was just a billionaire name in Forbes. He looked human now, tired, uncertain, stripped of the armor wealth provides. "Thank you for coming," James said when Maya and Jennifer sat down. His voice was humble in a way billionaires rarely manage. "I wasn't sure you would." "I almost didn't." Maya maintained distance, her body language closed. "Mom asked me to give you one chance. This is it." James nodded, accepting the terms. For a long moment, neither spoke. The coffee shop hummed with normal life around them. Students studying, couples dating, people existing without the weight of abandonment and guilt crushing their conversations. Finally, James spoke. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just want you to know that walking away from you and your mother was the biggest mistake of my life. Not because of who you became, though I'm incredibly proud, but because I missed the chance to know you, to be there when you learned to walk, to sing you to sleep, to help you through every hard moment. I chose money and success over love, and I've regretted it every single day for 30 years. Then why did you stay away?" Maya's voice cracked, despite her determination to stay cold. "You're a billionaire. You could have found us any time. Why did you wait until I was on national television to care? Cowardice, shame, fear." James's honesty was brutal, unflinching. "The longer I waited, the harder it became to face what I'd done. I told myself you were better off without me, that showing up would only hurt you more. But the truth is, I was scared. Scared you'd hate me, which you should. Scared Carmen would reject me, which she should have. Scared of being a father because I never had a good one myself and didn't know how to be better." He paused. "There's no excuse, just explanation. I was a coward at 22, and I stayed a coward until watching you sing forced me to confront what I'd done." Maya studied him, really looked at him for the first time. This close, their resemblance was undeniable. The same stubborn chin, the same intense eyes. The same way they both crossed their arms when defensive. She'd inherited his features, but Carmen's heart. The combination was jarring, a living reminder of two people who'd briefly loved each other before reality destroyed them. "I don't know if I can forgive you," she said honestly, each word careful. "You hurt my mother. You let us struggle when one check from you could have changed everything. You only showed up when it suited your narrative, when you could play hero on national television. I know, you're right. But I also don't want to carry hate forever. It's exhausting, and it doesn't change anything." Maya exhaled slowly, making a decision that terrified her. "So here's what's going to happen. You don't get to be my dad. That ship sailed 16 years ago. But maybe, if you prove you've actually changed, and not just feeling guilty, you can be James. Someone I know. Someone who's part of my life in whatever small way makes sense." "I'll take it," James said quickly, desperately, like she was offering water in a desert. "Whatever you're willing to give, however small. And you keep funding Mom's medical care, not as debt payment or charity, but because it's the right thing to do. She's your responsibility too, whether you abandoned her or not." "Already done. She'll never worry about medical bills again. I've set up a trust that will cover everything for the rest of her life. And the foundation you started, the one for single mothers, that's not about publicity. That's real work that actually helps people." "It is. I've dedicated $100 million so far, with more every year. It won't make up for what I did to your mother, but maybe it prevents other women from suffering the same way." Maya nodded slowly. Then, surprising herself more than him, she reached across the table and took his hand. It was calloused from years of working with technology, building his empire with his own hands before the money came. So different from Carmen's hands, rough from cleaning and service work. But both had been shaped by their choices, by sacrifice in different forms. "I don't know if this works," Maya said, her voice softer now. "I don't know if we can build something real from this much damage. But I'm willing to try. For Mom, because she asked me to. And for me, because I don't want to be defined by what you did anymore." "That's more than I deserve," James whispered, tears streaming down his face openly now. "Thank you. Thank you for giving me a chance I don't deserve." They talked for 3 hours that day, Jennifer eventually leaving to give them privacy. James told Maya about his childhood, parents who measured love in achievements, pressure that made him obsessed with success, the way fear of failure drove every decision. Maya told him about her life, the subway performances that started as survival and became art, the years of watching Carmen sacrifice, the moment she realized poverty was killing them slowly and she had to do something impossible to save her mother. They found common ground in unexpected places, a shared love of jazz, specifically Miles Davis. The same tendency to work obsessively, losing themselves in creation, the way they both hid vulnerability behind walls of competence and control. The fact that they both cried at the same sad movies, though neither would admit it until that conversation. It wasn't redemption, not yet, maybe never. It wasn't a Hollywood ending where the absent father returns and everything's perfect. It was two broken people trying to build a bridge across 30 years of damage, knowing the bridge might collapse, but trying anyway because the alternative was permanent separation. But it was a start, a genuine, honest start. Maya stood backstage at Madison Square Garden, preparing for the biggest performance of her career. Her second album, Stronger at the Broken Places, had debuted at #1 and stayed there for 12 weeks. She'd won 2 Grammys, including Best New Artist. She'd performed for presidents and foreign dignitaries. She'd become a voice for her generation, speaking truth about poverty and struggle and survival in ways that made people uncomfortable and inspired. But tonight was special for reasons beyond professional success. Carmen would be there in the audience, healthy, glowing, 2 years in remission and thriving. The doctors called her recovery remarkable, borderline miraculous. She'd beaten stage 3 pancreatic cancer through a combination of cutting-edge treatment, determination, and love that refused to accept death as inevitable. And James would be there too. Their relationship had evolved slowly over 18 months. Monthly dinners that became weekly calls, awkward conversations that gradually grew comfortable. The slow building of trust between people who had every reason not to trust each other. Maya still called him James, not Dad. Maybe she always would. But the anger had faded into something softer, something that looked like cautious affection and tentative family. He'd proven his commitment not through money, though he'd established a trust fund for Maya she'd barely touched, but through showing up. He attended every concert, every interview, every moment he was invited to. He'd reconnected with Ethan and Claire, her half-siblings, and they'd all tentatively become a strange, blended family. He'd maintained his foundation, expanding it to help 10,000 families so far. He'd proven through consistent action that people can change, even when change comes decades late. "You ready, superstar?" Carmen appeared in the dressing room doorway, radiant in an elegant dress that James had bought her, this time after asking Maya's permission, and Maya had said yes. 20,000 people are waiting to hear you, plus a few million watching the live stream. "I'm nervous," Maya admitted, something she rarely did anymore. Success had built confidence, but this performance felt different. She was debuting a new song, one she'd written about forgiveness and family, and the complicated truth that people can hurt you terribly and still deserve grace. "You're going to be amazing. You always are." Carmen hugged her daughter tight, the embrace of someone who'd almost lost the chance to give any more hugs. You saved my life, Mija. Everything else is just beautiful bonus. We saved each other, Mom. We always have. James knocked softly before entering, giving them space for their moment. He held a gift, a vintage Gibson guitar from 1960, the year Carmen was born, restored to perfect condition. For good luck tonight, he said shyly, though you've never needed luck. Just yourself. Maya took the guitar, testing its weight, its perfect sound that only decades of aging could create. Thank you. For this, for being here. For showing up, even when I made it hard. You should have made it harder. I deserved worse than I got. James's voice was thick with emotion he no longer tried to hide. I missed 16 years of your life. I'm not missing anything else. Not performances, not birthdays, not random Tuesdays. I'm here now, for whatever time I have left to make up for lost time. They stood there, three people connected by blood and damage, in the slow, painful work of healing. It wasn't perfect. Families never are, especially ones built from abandonment and reunion. But it was real and honest and growing stronger every day. That counted for something. Ethan and Claire arrived backstage, Maya's half-siblings who'd become actual siblings over months of awkward family dinners and text threads. They brought flowers and excitement, the easy affection of people who'd decided forgiveness was more powerful than grudges. You're going to kill it, Ethan said, hugging her. At 20, he was studying social work at Columbia, inspired by his father's foundation to actually help people instead of just making money. We're sitting front row. If you suck, we're heckling. Please don't, Maya laughed, the sound genuine and light in a way it hadn't been for years. This was family, imperfect, complicated, built from ruins, but family nonetheless. When Maya walked onto that stage carrying her new guitar and old scars, the crowd erupted. The lights blazed. 20,000 people screamed her name. And she looked into the audience to find Carmen and James and her siblings sitting together, all crying, all proud, all grateful for the impossible journey that brought them here. She sang her new song, Thank You for Leaving, about how sometimes abandonment teaches lessons presence never could, about how the hardest experiences forge the strongest people, about how you can acknowledge pain without being destroyed by it. She sang about her father, not with bitterness, but with honest complexity, recognizing that the man who abandoned her was also the man trying desperately to make amends. And both truths could exist simultaneously. The lyrics acknowledged everything: the poverty, the struggle, the years of wondering why she wasn't enough for her father to stay. But they also acknowledged growth, change, the reality that people at 22 make terrible choices they spend the rest of their lives trying to fix. She sang about her mother's strength, about being raised by love even when money was absent, about learning that family isn't just who gives you life, but who shows up for your living. When the song ended, silence filled the massive arena for 3 perfect seconds. Then applause erupted like thunder. Not just appreciation for technical skill, but recognition of emotional truth. Maya had given them something rare: honest complexity instead of simple narrative, real healing instead of fairy tale resolution. After the show, Maya found her family waiting backstage. Carmen hugged her first, as always. Then James, who whispered, I'm so proud of you. Not for your success, but for your grace. You're better than I ever was. I'm better because of Mom, Maya replied. And maybe despite you. But you're trying to be better too. That counts for something. They went to dinner together. The whole strange, blended family. They laughed over pasta and wine, told stories, made plans for holidays and birthdays, and normal things families do. James picked up the check without making it awkward. Carmen teased him about his terrible fashion sense. Ethan and Claire argued about politics while Maya mediated. It was messy and imperfect and real. As they left the restaurant, paparazzi caught photos. Maya Rodriguez with her family, including billionaire father James Thornton. The tabloids would speculate, create drama where none existed, turn their complicated reality into simple headline. But Maya didn't care anymore. She'd learned that other people's narratives didn't define her truth. In the car ride home, Carmen took Maya's hand. You did it, Mika. Everything we dreamed of and more. You're successful. I'm healthy. We have a family. We won. Maya squeezed back, looking at the city lights flashing past. We did. But Mom, I need to ask you something. Are you happy? Really happy? Or are you just relieved we survived? Carmen considered the question carefully. Both, but mostly happy. Happy that you're building a life based on passion instead of desperation. Happy that I'll see you get married someday, have kids if you want them, grow old. Happy that we don't have to choose between electricity and food anymore. Is that enough? It's everything, Maya said, tears streaming down her face. It's literally everything. She'd won America's Got Talent to save her mother. She'd discovered her father along the way and slowly, painfully learned to let him into her life. But the real victory, the one that mattered more than fame or money or recognition, was learning that healing doesn't require perfection. It requires honest effort, consistent showing up, and the courage to try even when trying means risking new hurt. The poor girl from the Bronx had made it, not just to fame and fortune, though she had both now. She'd made it to something more valuable, peace with her past, hope for her future, and a family built not on traditional foundations, but on the harder, stronger material of forgiveness and second chances. James had been absent for 16 years, but he was present now. That didn't erase the damage, but it meant something. Carmen had nearly died, but she was alive now and would be for years to come. That was everything. Maya had struggled through poverty and trauma, but she'd transformed suffering into art that helped others. That was purpose. And standing in Queens outside their modest house, the one Maya bought with her winnings, the one that represented everything they'd fought for, Maya realized she'd found what she'd been searching for all along. Not just survival, but actual living. Not just making it through, but making it count. She looked at her mother, at James hovering awkwardly by his car, at Jennifer pulling up to hang out like they were normal teenagers with normal problems, and felt something she'd been denied for 16 years. Security. Real, genuine security that came not from money, but from being surrounded by people who wouldn't let her fall. Thank you, Maya whispered to no one and everyone. To the universe that had tested her mercilessly and finally given her a break. To her mother who'd never stopped fighting. To James who'd finally started. To herself for refusing to break despite every reason to shatter. The poor girl had won more than America's Got Talent. She'd won her life back. And that was the only happy ending that mattered. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe and hit the notification bell. We share powerful stories of redemption, resilience, and second chances every week. Your support helps us continue creating content that matters. We're almost at 10,000 subscribers. Let's reach that milestone together. And if you've experienced anything similar, whether it's forgiveness, family reunification, or overcoming impossible odds, share your story in the comments below. Your words might inspire someone who desperately needs to hear them. Let's grow this community of hope together.